Stefan's fault.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, January 6, 2014 meeting of the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee. Those watching at home are reminded that they can access the packet of materials for the meeting online at the district's website. Tonight's first item of business will be the citizen question comment period. Following that, a brief report regarding the Baker School will be provided by Mr. Azer, as well as a school choice and charter update. To begin with, could we please join in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our first item, as I mentioned, will be the public comment period. Is there anybody from the public that would like to make a comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the student reports. The student representative, Patrick Hanbury, please.
Thank you. So I have a little update from one of my items from 2 weeks ago. The gingerbread contest was held on Thursday, and my class happened to win in first place the DY Jazz Band, so I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Also, next Thursday, on January 16th, there's going to be the annual band concert featuring the 8th, 9th concert band, 8th, 9th jazz band, and the 10 through 12 band. As well as the following day, there will be the annual talent show, January 17th. So you should all attend both events. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanbury. Any questions for Mr. Hanbury?
Could you just tell us those 8th and 9th concert band, 8th and 9th jazz band, and then I couldn't write fast enough.
Oh, the 10 through 12 concert band as well.
7.
And that's 7, yeah. You're welcome.
A question, Patrick,
Yeah.
without putting you on the spot. I think that there was a senior last year that kind of started the 9th grade jazz band.
Yes, that was Peter Julian.
That's right. I know as soon as I hear his name, it's going to click. Was there another student that took that over? Or did that kind of just become part of the regular?
Yeah, that turned into a course that's now at DY, just like
cool.
the other jazz band.
Cool.
And
Very
that's
good.
run by Mr. Casano.
That's great. Very good to hear that it continued. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next item is the Dennis and Yarmouth Selectmen Liaison, starting with Mr. Carey from Dennis, please.
The only report I have is that I've been making sure that Ms. McMahon from the Dennis Board of Selectmen is up to date on the Baker issue. Not that we've had a whole lot of information, but I'm sure she told me she was going to be here this evening to see the report that Larry's going to give us. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Any questions for Mr. Carey? Seeing none, we'll move on to Ms. St. Germain for the Yarmouth.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item now will be our Baker School update presented by our Director of Finance and Operations, Mr. Azer, please.
If I could just set the tone before Larry
Sure.
starts. Larry, I think I have my clicker with me if you want it. Okay. Tomorrow evening, Mr. Carey, you mentioned the Dennis Selectmen. So tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, we will be attending the Dennis Selectmen's meeting. And I talked with the chairman of the Finance Committee today, Mr. Plath, and the entire Finance Committee will attend the meeting as well tomorrow. And we'll give an update so that the Dennis community can hear about what's happening with Baker, aside from what they read in the paper. So a lot of what we'll talk about, what Larry will talk about tonight, we'll probably talk about tomorrow, but we want to be able to answer the selectmen's questions firsthand. And obviously, this is something that we need to work hand in hand when we have a situation like this, as we're the caretakers of the buildings, but the towns really still own their school buildings. So that's what we've been kind of keeping in contact through the town administrator And he and I met right before the holidays just to talk about how to proceed. And so we feel like as challenging as this is, we feel like it's somewhat as under control as a big situation like this can be. So thank you. Turn it over to Larry.
Thank you. I'm going to sit over here so I don't blind Maureen with the laser pointer. So as you have heard, the Baker Gymnasium is closed. That entire wing of the building is closed due to a structural failure in the ceiling of the gymnasium. What had happened was on the Wednesday before vacation, so on December 18th, as part of our routine maintenance inspections of the buildings that our facilities and custodial staff do, the custodian noticed a severe separation of the ceiling from the wall. This is the stage right here against the wall, and this is the ceiling pulling away from it. From here, this is looking from the stage towards the remainder of the building. It's tough to tell, but if you can see that see all these black spots, that's between the tiles. That shouldn't be there. If you can see further off in the distance, it's all white because they're tightly together. And here you can see this is where the ceiling is sagging, and it's pushing down on those tiles away from each other. So in addition to it pushing down, it was pulling away from the wall, and there are several instances where this is happening against the wall. This is the west side near the stage where this is happening. So as I said, on Wednesday the 18th, this was observed by the custodian on staff. Immediately brought in our facilities manager, Ms. Cashin, who reviewed it and immediately called in the building inspector from the town of Dennis to take a look at it. And it was decided that for safety and precautionary reasons that that wing should be entirely closed in case that it got worse and it failed. And so on the Thursday and Friday before vacation, that whole wing of the building was closed. And you may have remembered from your look-ahead calendar from a prior packet, that Friday morning there was actually supposed to be a concert for the entire school and parents in that gymnasium, because that's essentially the auditorium as well for the building. So that was canceled, obviously. And the gym classes and the classes that are underneath the gym, excuse me, there are some classrooms in the lower level underneath the gymnasium, the art room, the music room, and the special education SEALS program for medically fragile students are all underneath the gym. So those were all closed off as well. So those were relocated to other parts of the building for those 2 days. So on that Friday morning, we brought in a structural engineer who's done some work for us in the past. Came on Friday morning to do an initial inspection to verify what had been seen. Climbed up to get a quick look at there and saw what was happening, and then came back again on the following Monday during vacation week for a more thorough inspection. What the engineer found was that 4 out of the 5 roof trusses, and I'll skip ahead for a second. This is the gymnasium here, and this is the stage. This is facing north, and this is west. There are 5 trusses that are pretty much evenly spaced across, going from east to west. The first stress, the northernmost truss is severely overstressed. The 4th one down here has a complete crack in it, as you'll see from some of the pictures, and the other 3 are very stressed as well. So that picture I showed you of the ceiling dipping, that's basically happening at 5 different spots under each of those trusses, and it's pulling away from the wall in various degrees across that whole side where the stage is right here. So that photo where I showed you the pulling away from the wall was right about here between the 1st and 2nd truss. And if you go down there, we have other pictures that show basically the same thing at other locations. So to add to things, the ceiling tiles had to be taken down, and we did an inspection of what's above the ceiling tiles, and given the age of the building, that part of the building was built in the 1950s. There is vermiculite, which is a type of hazardous material, so when we get up there to do the work, we also have to abate that work, which is another part of why that entire section of the building is closed off, because now it's becoming exposed. It's actually starting to fall through the cracks. So that presents another set of problems. So these are some pictures that the engineer took from when he climbed up inside. You can see here on the left, oops, wrong button. There we go. See on the left, you can see some cracking in the beams that are above the ceiling to the roof. You can see one here that's completely split. So obviously some major damage there and potential for problems. Again, see here, more cracking and splitting in the beams right here. So lots of problems up there. So what the engineer recommended is the most immediate course of action to be taken is to shore up the ceiling so it didn't collapse. Because with all the weather and the wind and rain and snow coming, the fear was that any additional weight or pressure put on the roof and the ceiling could cause a collapse, which would essentially crush the floor and just severely impact that whole section of the building. So we contacted the state, got an emergency waiver on the procurement rules, so we didn't have to do a full bid process and advertise and the whole thing. We got somebody, fortunately we found a local contractor who stepped up right around Christmas time, brought in a whole crew. And what we had to do was, for the 5 trusses, and because they span the entire width of the gym, we're putting up in the gym area, this on the left here, 16 of these spaced specifically to hold up the ceiling and the trusses. And then on the right here, this is underneath, because as you have that tension between the gym ceiling and the gym floor, anything that happens could push through the floor. So you've got to also support it from underneath. So we've had to empty out the art room and the music room and some of the other areas so we could fit these shoring columns in, because they have to be in specific places. We couldn't just put them everywhere. They had to be on actual beams. So that the gym has been all done. The lower level should be done in the next couple of days, and get that taken care of. So as far as the repairs go, we have a company that's done, a hygienist that's done work for us in the past regarding abatement work. They came in last week to conduct a walkthrough for some companies that do this type of work. And again, we have a waiver on the formal procurement process, so we don't have to advertise and bid. We can just get quotes. And so those we expect to have in tomorrow. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll have quotes from companies, and we'll get that work started as soon as possible to abate any of the hazardous material that's in that section of the building. Once that's done, then we have to take all the ceiling tiles down, and then we'll really get a full 100% view of what is truly up there, whether it's just the trusses and the beams or if it's actual up to the roof. So when people have been asking, well, how long is this going to take, how much it's going to cost, we don't know until we fully get up there, until we can have a full view of the ceiling, because again, when the engineer and folks were up there, they were not crawling around the entire span of it. So until we get a full exposure up there, we're not going to know exactly what the full extent of the repairs are. Once that's done, we'll put together specifications, we'll put together some bid documents. At that point, we do have a choice. We can either ask for another waiver on the advertising, which on the one hand would reduce the time frame by anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, because you have to advertise and you have to get a bid process and so on and so forth. So we could cut down on that time. On the other hand, though, if you do waive that process, you can only go through vendors who are certified through the state. So it does limit your pool of potential vendors to do that work. So when we get to that point, we'll have to make a decision on if we want to seek another waiver for that. But as I said, given the information we have now, we expect it to take a minimum of 3 to 4 months. It could take longer. Essentially, we've made plans, or I should say the Principal Deppin and his staff have made plans for that area to be out of commission for essentially the rest of the school year. If it reopens before then, terrific. But that's, he and his folks know that this is not just a couple of week kind of thing. They're preparing for the long haul in this. For those who have children at the Baker School, obviously today was the first day back from vacation. Because the gymnasium is not fully shored up yet, there is still theoretically the potential for a collapse. So the building inspector wanted to keep a 25-foot perimeter around the outside of the building. So if you've been down there, you'll see there's ropes and cones and sawhorses to not to stay away from there. So we're asking parents to bear with us while we get through this, and of course the weather and the mucky situation makes things even more complicated, but we ask people to bear with us, perhaps arrive a few minutes earlier to give yourself some time. But students will have to be dropped off. For those who don't take the bus, drop off in the lower lot and then walk up the stairs or the ramp and enter through the main part of the building. Because you can't go in through the gym or through the back doors as we've done in the past. As far as relocating those programs, the special ed SEALS program has been moved to the high school in the same location as that medically fragile program, so that works out pretty well. The music and art classrooms were moved to other parts of the building. The music is in the computer lab now. The art teacher is in the teacher's lounge, and that has been relocated elsewhere in the building, and we thank the staff for their understanding and being moved around for that. Phys ed, obviously this is a tough time of year to not have a gym, but when the weather's warm, they'll go outside. When not, they have use of the cafeteria. There's other parts of the building. Principal Deppen is working on some creative ideas on how to get that physical activity without having that big wide open space. And so again, we just ask for people to sort of bear with us while we work on that. And lastly, because the music class was moved into the computer lab is temporarily disassembled. So we're trying to figure out a way to still get that technology teaching to the students. But that is pretty much what we have for you right now. I'll be happy to
I
answer
want to
any
say a
question or
couple of
anything.
things about this before we take the questions. I think it's really important that people at home also understand that it's not something that necessarily would have been something that people find. I mean, you don't go up into your roof and say, how are my trusses doing? Wonder if they're stable or not. You're dealing with a building here that's 80 years old in one part, 50, 60 years old in another part, and so on. There's like 3 different sections. It's very fortunate that our staff found this when they did. It happened around the same time that we heard in London that there was a collapse and many people were hurt. So we think there are some positive things about finding it. It certainly isn't anything that anybody was hoping would happen or anything like that. I feel very confident, been working, as I said, with Rick White right away and with folks from the town of Dennis to try to figure out how we're going to deal with this. We'll be at the selectmen's meeting tomorrow to give them an update. They have a permanent building committee in Dennis, and one of their members, Gary Barber, has been very, very helpful to us. He was on the scene right away with Sandy called him and asked him to join us on the day that the engineer came. So we're trying to, do our due diligence and making sure that everybody knows. The most difficult part of all of this, I think, is that it's not like a planned project where you go out to bid and you say, okay, this is how much we're going to spend. As each step takes place is when we find out, okay, here's what we're dealing with, and now this is what the expense might be. And so we have to take it in phases. We feel really confident that the kids are safe in their building and the teachers are safe and that everyone over there is safe at this point. But just sort of want people to, like sometimes people get a little carried away with, well, how come you didn't know, and why didn't you find this? And we really found it, I think, as quickly as anybody could find something like this. So I think those are just a couple of comments that I want to make, and so I want to thank the staff for their due diligence as well. So.
Any questions? Mr. Morris, please.
What aspects of insurance coverage come into play in this area, if any, and what I am reminded as a member of the Facilities Planning Subcommittee that we have had professional construction companies actually going over the buildings for planning purposes. It's not that I know that we haven't, over the years, ignored any of the problems that come to mind or come to light. We try to anticipate, I know from past practice. So I'm assuming the people in Dennis, that town building committee has had access to the Baker and Wixon facilities planning books as well. So that one's, two questions on that.
Yeah, first question on the insurance, we as I said, and as the superintendent said, until we fully get up there and see what exactly the issues are and can potentially identify a cause, it's not certain that we'll be able to identify a cause for that, and so that would most likely dictate any insurance if it was depending upon what the issue was. I mean, we did replace that roof 2.5 years ago as part of the green repair project. So I don't want to rule out or speculate that it is or isn't, that it came from that, or it was some other incident that predates that just finally caused the trusses to crack and snap. And the second question, I'm sorry?
I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company that we use.
Okay, I think
the architect?
I think the question that you're asking is whether or not the building committee is separate from their capital outlay committee.
Right.
We've shared the information with the capital outlay committee. It just so happens that they have, because they were looking at doing their new town hall and things like that, they have a group of folks who are in the construction field and have been working as a building committee over in the town of Dennis. So we're just making use of their expertise to help us along this process. It's not anything that we've had lots of conversations with them in the past, except to know who they are and what some of their skills are and how they can help us out. And that's how, you saw that we used a local person who could come in right away and deal with that. And that was through the connections there where someone said, oh, I know this person. And, we're able to, this was an emergency. You have to work with everybody that you have around you to help you when you have an emergency. So it's not a long planned thing.
Right. The reference I was also making was to the company that gave the walkthrough for the Yarmouth Capital Budget Committee.
KBA.
Right. And they had an analysis from their
Right.
overview or their, I won't call it an inspection, but their set of recommendations.
Yeah, but clearly, I don't know that even those kinds of things go that deeply. Nobody lifts off their roof and looks at their trusses. We look at the boilers, we look at the windows, we look at the doors, we look at the floors, the roof, the window envelope, how the bricks are performing and so on and so forth. But I don't think that, those are places that you can't see typically.
Right. I'm aware, if people have the question about why, how come you never saw this, in actuality, we have hired experts to do an appropriate level citing of maintenance needs. This obviously is something that would be beyond that purview. We've had it in other old buildings from time to time in Yarmouth and Dennis. Those, 80-year-old building is gone way beyond its original expected use.
Mr. Edwards, please.
Larry, could you go back to the pictures on the gymnasium roof truss? Okay, no, back, right there. Couple questions. Number one, if in fact we find out, it appears that there's been a load put on that roof, right where would we have any, when the people the contractors who did the roof 2 years ago, did they also use that part of the building for putting the shingles and for, in other words, for holding some of their product? Because if you look at how it is, it's coming down, okay? And a lot of those, I mean, granted, the building's a year old, but my house is older than this building, and I'm not having any problems with that because I don't put any load on it in that way. So those are a couple of my questions, because I understand and I see how the wood is breaking, and on the other side it's going, and I'm sure there's other people who are more professional than I just looking at it. But if in fact we find that the contractor who did the work, did they put an additional load on it? Is there a way to, in other words, is there a way to do that? Because that's what it looks like to me, because the way the thing is being pushed down and the way the wood is breaking.
Yeah, the engineer who went up there did share with us that he observed that there was definitely some kind of pressure put on those beams, but could not say with any certainty that it was from the roof down, that a weight was put on the roof that caused it, or if perhaps it could have predated the roof and there might have been a leak that built up that added that weight there. One of the comments he did make when he was up there making his observation was that it appeared to be a lot of dry rot up there, which would indicate that it predated the new roof and that it had gotten wet and damp and then dried. And again, I'm not a building expert either, but just sharing what he had shared with us. So it's possible that when the shingles were put up during the roof insulation, that may have added to that. But I don't know that if we can say with any degree of certainty that that was the cause, because it does appear, at least again, at the limited ability we've had to get in there in this, that there does appear to be some damage that predates that new roof being put in a couple of years ago. But again, until we get the full thing going and seeing, because won't know for sure. And like I said, we may never know with 100% certainty what the cause of it was. And to be honest, at this point, more of our focus is on how do we fix it and get it right and ready and safe again, versus, okay, what happened? I mean, it already happened. I mean, it may be.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm
yeah.
just saying that you got to go
Yeah,
on both ways. You got to look,
Right.
you got to get
Yep.
it taken care of, make sure that the thing's safe, and then on the
Right.
same tune, you have to go up and say, okay, what's the issue? The other thing that I have is getting back to Phil's question, is that we had these engineers come in and do a study to tell us what was wrong with our buildings for a number of years ago, okay? Is that one of the things that they should be looking? In other words, is this one of the things, which brings me to the next question, if we've had problems at Ezra Baker, would it be prudent for us to have them come back and take a look at all the buildings to make sure that we're not having any problems? Because if that's dry rot or something else like that, then it might be an idea to look at Wixon, Matikes, unless Matikes is done with steel beams. And then the question, because the laws may have changed in between that time. Okay, so I think that is that, number one, does that engineering company who did that analysis, do they also look at that?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember from the drafts of the facilities report that we've been working with the last couple of months, I believe 4 of the other schools are recommended to have roof replacement in the short-term future. Matikes, Wixon, Station Ave, and M.E. Small. Parts of M.E. Small and Matikes have been done in the recent past, but the others are essentially original, anywhere from 20 to 40 years old. So we do know there are issues with the other roofs.
What do you mean issues? In other
well,
words,
that
you're having structural issues
No,
or
no.
just issues
No.
with the fact that the roof is leaking?
Well, there are some leaks, I mean, but again, you don't know if there's something underneath the roof that has been further damaged until you
Well,
rip
is
up
there a
the
way,
roof.
so is there a way for them?
Or
to-
you've either got to come in from the top or go under from the bottom.
And so they haven't looked at whether there's a structural issue with those particular roofs, because that's not one of the things they look at, is that correct?
No, not unless we specifically ask them to. I mean, there have been cases in my time, we said, yeah, we want someone to come in and take a look at this specific thing. We did have them come in and look at Wixon. The last, I hear keys jangling, so I know Sandy's coming. We did have our architect and engineer come look at Wixon, and we did do some work in some certain areas around the roof line that were the most urgent to be addressed. But we know that there are issues with leaking in certain areas, but to the extent to which those are affected, again, you don't know 100% until you actually either rip up the roof or rip up the ceiling and
But
go
then,
one way or the other.
once we find this, does it make sense for us to have them go and look at other buildings to make sure that we're not gonna run into the same structural issues further on down the line?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I'll just say this, we recently had a new roof put on our house. While they were there, we said, well, take a look and make sure there's nothing structurally that should be replaced, that's what you do. A lot of times that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily show up. I mean, they told us, no, it looks pretty good, and they just put on the new roof. But it doesn't mean that after that new roof's up there, that some of that wood won't continue to rot or whatever. I mean, the only thing I could say is the folks that I talked to from, especially Gary Barber from the building committee, he has assured me that this is nothing that could have been predicted.
Oh, I'm not saying that it is,
And
I'm just asking the question.
But I feel comfortable taking, somebody who has that building experience, he's not a contractor for the district or anything like that. He's a citizen of the town who has a vested interest in making sure that all of our buildings are high quality.
That's all I'm saying, is if we're having a problem with this, then it would behoove us to take a look at the other buildings that we have, specifically to say, okay, is there a way to go up there to take a look at it? Because you can't look from the top down. Usually you got to look from the bottom up.
Sandy, you have something to add to that?
You probably can get a structural engineer or some of the engineers to come in, but you won't catch what we can firsthand. First of all, our work order system, our talks with the custodians, and a class that I had taken with Nick Pascarosa about going and checking. I call it the Feng Shui class. Don't tell him, Ken. But you go and you look at your buildings constantly. And since I've been in this position, I look at them in the morning, I look at them at night, I look at them during vacation, I go in different times, and you see different things that happen. My first year on board, I saw Wixon walls were coming off. We had some structural issues going on there. I had the engineers come in, they looked at it to make sure that nothing was sinking or reasons for the cracks. So when I go in and I take my pictures during a storm or whatever, I constantly am looking at that. That's what your maintenance department does. That's what you pay me for, to go in and see this. We had been monitoring on different sections at Baker. When we first put the insulation in the gym area, we noticed that there was the crack. The crack was less than 1/4 of an inch. And Brian has been monitoring that. He can tell when the insulation did drop down. When he saw it last week, he says to me, Sandy, that is opened up, and I went there and we saw it. In the meantime, we had been monitoring that for over 6 months. Nothing moved, but it happened that fast. So dry rot. The other thing that the architect told me up there in the trusses, that because of the wooden trusses and all the stacking and the webbing and stuff, that has been going on for some time. When the new roof was put on, that could have happened, but some of the dry rot could have happened. So those are things that happen that just have been from wear and tear, sort of like your bones. They just, when you get 50, they just don't work like they did when they were 20. But there are a lot of the buildings that have those because of the maintenance department going around, because of the work order systems, because of the staff working with the work order systems in the classrooms, et cetera. We can find the problems that are happening. We can find the leaks that are in the pipes. My pipes are probably more scary to me than my roofs, and that type of thing. So with the maintenance department doing their job, and that's what you pay me for, so hopefully I do, we're catching these things. And luckily, that's what happened in this, that people were observant, seeing different things and watching it. even if you hired an engineer or somebody to come in and check that, you wouldn't catch all those, because these are areas that you can't get up to. There's just crawl space areas. You're dealing with, once we did get up there, we found out that the asbestos is there, so even though we had the AHERA plan in place, we don't find those things until we actually get into it. So the one blessing is that constant communication, that constant looking at the different things and seeing it. I also had noticed in our front stairs, so we had already put that in to the inspector, so he had written that up so that we could get it in the budget to take care of. So that's also another thing that will have to be in place too. So it is seen. We don't always necessarily have the budget to take care of those things, but if they're priorities, I'll definitely get with Carol and Larry to make sure that those monies get in the budget to take care of it. So,
If in fact that the buildings are the property of each individual town, where does the responsibility, if it's minor routine maintenance versus major maintenance, where is the line drawn?
Well,
Between who's responsible for what, you follow what I'm saying?
But we
I
take,
called in-
hang on a second. We take care of that with the towns. I mean, some of the general routine maintenance is something that we do on a regular basis. We're changing the air filters, we're painting, we're doing a lot of different things, and you've seen that over the years of some of the things that we do within our regular budget. It's kind of I consider it a maintenance of effort. It's the big stuff that the towns have to help us with. But, you know, they have a limited resources as well, and there's only so much that they can do at a time. And we have a lot of buildings to take care of, and they have other buildings besides ours. So we try to work with them to see, here are the priorities. Each town has a either capital planning or capital outlay committee. We meet with them on a regular basis to go over what our priorities are and why those are our priorities. As Phil mentioned, the KBA has done, now we're in a second study that we've had, and they are familiar with those studies. We go over those with them, and they have those. So I think there's good communication between the two towns and the school department when it comes to but, you know, this is just something that happened. It was unforeseen. As Sandy said, sometimes you see a little crack somewhere. A little crack that's a quarter of an inch doesn't mean anything. Then it becomes a half inch. You go, oh my goodness, something's happening. So that's exactly what happened in this case. And we were able to, I mean, imagine if we hadn't caught it and we were in there and having a concert, just like it happened the same time that London situation was going on.
Vibration.
We could have been, the vibration of the number of people in that room on that particular day, singing and dancing and doing whatever, could have been a disaster. So I say, hallelujah. It wasn't a disaster, but we do have a big problem to deal with. And the town of Dennis has been wonderful working with us. And I see no reason why that won't continue. We have a problem, we have to figure it out together, and I'd like to blame somebody or, you know, charge somebody else, and maybe we can if we find something specific, but I don't think that the people who went up there and put on a new roof ignored a problem, or, you know, it would have been more money for them if they, hey, you got more problems, how about we fix this for you? I just don't think that that's what happened. I think those are the things that sometimes can happen. I'm pretty sure that those people in London didn't all go into that auditorium and think, well, gee, today the roof's going to fall down. And sometimes things just do happen, and when they're unforeseen. We're just glad when it's not too bad.
Glad it was gone.
Mr. Carey?
One, I think you'll find that Gary Barber's voice is well respected within the town of Dennis. It's on.
I don't think we can hear you.
I think you'll find that Gary Barber's voice is very well respected within the town of Dennis, and he has worked on just about every major town construction project. So working with him, I think, is going to be very beneficial. The one thing that I wanted to go back to is the slide with the trusses, because the damage looked, yeah. Could you explain the damage again and how many trusses, and just so that it's more than one truss where 5 pallets were put in one area. You You know, could we go over that again?
Yeah, so this is the, oops, again, wrong button. Sorry. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So this is the whole gym area. This is the front lobby,
This
the
is the
stairs,
28
the
side.
stage. This is the 28 side. This is heading north. The ball field's behind here. This is, the rest of the building is off the screen to the right. So there are 5 trusses, these dotted lines that I overlaid on the floor plan. I did the best I could to improvise because we didn't have an actual drawing. But there's 5 trusses up there that are basically evenly spread apart. They're about 15, 16 feet apart. Each of them, to different degrees, are display sagging that I showed on the other side, where you can see the blackness coming through because the tiles are pulling apart. And in addition to the ceiling sagging at various degrees on the trusses, it's pulling away from the wall, as I showed you in this picture here. So this is the sagging, this is the pulling away from the wall because it's pulling that way.
Yeah.
Right, again, you have to forgive my lack of building jargon, hips and purlings and of the 5 trusses, the number 4, this one, is the one that has a complete crack in it and is severely stressed. The first one at the northernmost and the third in the middle also have severe overstressing. And the second and the fifth one, the fifth being the southernmost, closest to the front doors, also have some overstressing, but not as much. And again, these observations are based on the preliminary citing that the structural engineer did the couple times he went up there and visually looked at it. Once we take all of the ceiling tiles down, there's actually 2 layers of tiles, right? So once we take all those down and we get all the material out of there and it's all exposed, then we'll fully see. Because again, when you climb up here, you climb up from the stage, so you're getting more visibility on the west side, which is where it's pulling away from the stage more, so that's where it appears to be more stressed. But we didn't have visibility to the east side because, like Sandy said, it's a small crawl space through
Can't get there.
60 feet of asbestos. So nobody volunteered for that work. But there have been a lot of different people up there looking at it. But once we get all the ceiling tiles down, so now that the shoring's up, and once we finish that, then we can take the tiles down safely and get all that exposed. So that's why I say it's hard to predict, A, how long it'll take, B, how much it'll cost until we get there. It's kind of like peeling an onion. So, okay, we know that the ceiling tiles are falling. Okay, well, that's caused by the trusses. What's causing the trusses? So until you get there, that's why to the earlier question about the roof, until we fully get up there, it's not, you can't say with a high degree of certainty what the actual, is it the roof pushing down? Is it something in between that's pushing down? Again, that's a section that has a sloped roof versus the rest of the building is flat. So there's those kind of dynamics in there too, so.
Your addition on the left is actually helping that structure stay together. That has been pushing towards so that it's keeping it. And then all the 5 with the webbing and the purling is actually holding it all together. So there has been some breaking. It's been happening over time, and it's just now stressing. But the way it was built has actually saved it, kept it together.
I think the precautions that you've taken to shore up the building and shore up the ceiling are certainly more than prudent, and thank you for doing all that. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to lose the school year, the remainder of the school year, for that portion of the building, and at this point, it's why rush trying to go outside of a bid, or let's do this the best way that is beneficial to the Dennis taxpayers in the district, as opposed to just saying, well, if we can get it fixed within 3 weeks, paying a little bit more, we can have our building back. But it doesn't sound like that's going to happen, so.
Right, I agree, and that's why, as I said, we're taking the conservative approach that, let's do it right, as we do with all the major repairs.
Right.
And we've taken that same philosophy with the abatement work. Even though we've gotten a waiver on the advertising, we're still getting competitive quotes. And one of the things that the vendors that came in on the walkthrough asked was, well, do you want 1 shift or 2 shifts? Because if they put 2 shifts of people in there, they can get the work done faster.
Sure.
So we said, well, how about give us one quote for one shift and one quote for two shifts, and tell us how much it's gonna cost and how long it's gonna take, and then we'll weigh the pros and cons of that. And same thing with when we get to do the next stage of repairs, and we've done that with other things, like when we did the window work, replacing the windows, we said, okay, well, how much is, yeah, you can get it done faster if you do two shifts or weekends, but it's gonna cost you more, so, you weigh those and again, as Carol said earlier, we're the stewards of the buildings for the town, so we don't want, even though it's coming out of the town budget, we look at it as, it's all the same money, whether it's which account it's coming out of, it's all taxpayer money, whether it's the DY budget or the town capital budget, whatever, it's not an infinite pool. So, we're trying to be, obviously respectful of those things. So again, we've basically, and the staff has don't plan on coming back in that section of the building for the rest of the year. If it's done before then, terrific. But if not, then, there's no need to, especially as the weather goes on, April, May, then you can go outside for gym class. The tough thing is gonna be the next 8, 10 weeks, whatever, when it's cold out and you have to improvise phys ed class, but.
I think the other thing is too, how fast you want to get that part done is going to depend on what they tell us about the other pieces. Like, we might want to do that fast because it might be prudent to move on to the next stage a little quicker. Because if we don't, we're getting more damage or whatever it might be. We don't want to all of a sudden, even though we've shored it up, we don't want to all of a sudden have some other kinds of problems. So it might not be just a case of, oh my goodness, we can't use the gym with the kids. It's also a case of what else is there, and as Larry said, once you take stuff down and you can see what you have, then you say, okay, well, we better move to it might be even after the people start, well, we better move to the next stage more quickly. So we're gonna need that 2 shifts instead of 1, not from the standpoint of, of just the convenience or whatever. It is inconvenient. There's no 2 ways about it. But it is what it is, and we don't have other choices. So I feel like Kevin has done the best that he can to get everybody around to a place that makes sense. And, using the rooms was out of respect for the teachers who have to teach in that, so that they're not just going from room to room all the time. But, we kind of have to pull together as a team when stuff like this happens.
And that was my last point, is Kevin getting everything that he needs? Is there anything,
We're listening to him.
pods, we've rented pods before at the high school to facilitate outside things? Is there,
I don't know.
short of putting up a bubble for
Yeah.
outdoor gym.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's anything like that can really help. Our biggest thing right now is we're trying to figure out the technology. But Chris is looking at, this was one of our next buildings to go with the wireless anyway, So we're trying to see, well, could we facilitate some of that? But we just can't. We've taken care of the things that we can take care of right now, and we've got to, as we go, we've got to take it one step at a time, and if there's a different way that we can do something, we will.
Great, thank you very much, thank you.
Ms. St. Germain, please.
I have a question and a comment. I just want to say thank you, Sandy, so much for your due diligence. I know we spoke a couple of years ago, walking through, and you were telling me how much you did and how much you looked. And I listened to you, but I'd never appreciated that conversation as much as I do now. I have a crack in my kitchen, and I look at that all the time. I think, oh, is it getting any bigger? It's just a crack. She comes over, she'll have to come to eat, not just to look at my cracks in my kitchen. But I understand what you're saying. This is a building, there are many buildings. I am concerned very much about one thing. We had this company come and look at the structure and the buildings, the integrity of the roofs, to put on this photovoltaic paneling for solar. And they told us the buildings were solid and we could do this. And I trusted what they said. I have no idea about the engineering process and what you do. I know you can take a little special tool and go look up chimneys to see if, I mean, they have all kinds of cameras today and all kinds of things you can do. We just sold a home, so I learned a few things about that. I'm just surprised that we haven't got the technology to let us know that. And so what I'm asking you, if a company comes in and tells us that the buildings, the structure of the buildings are sound, that we can put up this paneling, what did they really look at? What are they really telling us? I mean, or don't they really know? Are they just looking at it and saying, well, we have this and this can hold this much stress, and if you put these panelings up plus snow, I want to know these people looked at our buildings and told us they were sound. Did they look at this building and not find it? And if they didn't, what's the answer here?
I can't say that they looked at that part of the roof. That was not one that was going to have the panels on it. They mainly had looked at the others, but I can't really say exactly what they had looked at structurally. I think that this was something that was happening internally with dry rot, with a roof leak that might have happened before. Since I've been facility manager, I didn't know of any leaks that were happening on that side of the building. I had some on the wall, which I took care of this past summer, that we had coming into the music and art areas. And so we sealed the mason, and that took care of most of it. But if you look in the back, you could see the cracks, and there were some things happening, so that you were looking at some other things that were going on in that building. And I think it's just one of those things that they might not have caught even if they had done a structural analysis. They should, if a structural analysis is done, there's a lot of engineering that goes in. While I watch this engineer going in there and checking it, there's a lot of physics and maths and loads that are above my helmet, let's put it that way, as he's testing to see where the towers should go. So it's quite intense, and that's not something that I've seen happen in the district. But on the areas where the solar panels are, those are flat roofs, those are a different structural.
I just want to thank you so much, though, for doing your due diligence and really checking. I mean, there's a lot of kids and a lot of people in a school building, and you being so observant really probably avoided a huge tragedy, and I just want to really thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want you to know that I love my job. I love what I do. And that's what it's all about. It's the staff, the students, and the community. I'm here to take care of the buildings, and that's what I get paid to do.
Mr. Morris?
A comment after listening to all the Q&A. Having served on 2 building committees and having attended a number of seminars that MASC puts together for studying appropriate and best practices for building and structural, and having been on the Yarmouth Capital Budget Committee, I would say that one thing I've learned or been told, and I believe it, that not all problems in municipal and school construction will manifest themselves immediately, but eventually they will in some minor all the way up to catastrophic response. The fact that this was not a catastrophic response, to me, is a note, or is we should red flag the fact, or green flag the fact, that the sequences and responses by the staff were rapid and thorough and safety oriented. This was, at first glance, a minor, seemingly minor visual clue, which the oversight by the maintenance department responded rapidly, and we have a larger problem, but it is not a larger problem from the standpoint of safety and the standpoint of having overlooked something before. So I'm once again also backing up that thank you.
Mr. Dykeman, please.
My feeling is I certainly am not qualified to judge anything this complicated, but I will say we have a professional staff. They seem to be doing pretty well. The the towns have the expertise available, or the town has the expertise available to assist. And I think that we could talk about this all night, but the reality is, if there was a problem with the company that did the roof, it'll eventually come to surface, and at that point in time, it'd be up to Carol and the people that are involved to recommend a course of action. Otherwise, I think what we're doing right now is the best route to proceed, and I think we ought to move along. Thank you.
Anything else to add, Mr. Azer? Good? You guys good? Very good. Let's move along to our next report. And we're going to leave Mr. Azer in the seat. It's nice and warm now. This will be our school choice and charter update.
All right, so as you may recall from prior years, we get official numbers on school choice and charter enrollment 3 times a year, in December, March, and June. So when we do the budget at the beginning of the year, it's based on estimated counts that come from the state, and but we get our first real check on that coming in December, when we get that first official quarter in here. So we want to review these numbers with you. There's a lot of numbers in here. There's a lot of different charts and stuff. We'll go through them at a moderate speed, but obviously if there's questions, feel free to jump in. So we're going to start off with school choice. These are the sending numbers. These are students who live in one of the 2 towns, but have chosen by school choice to attend another public school district. So you can see there's a total of 346 students that are attending, that are opting for the school choice program. Just almost a 50-50 split. So when you consider the enrollment is roughly 35-65, you can see that more of the Dennis students on a proportional basis opt for school choice. And that's largely because the students who depart the DY district for school choice tend to go to the east, to Monomoy and Nauset, as you can see. Some are going to Barnstable. You see that's more towards Yarmouth, so again, that's geography driven. But you can see there, that's the numbers for the sending. If we break down the same numbers, but by age range, you can see fairly spread out. You've got 89 K through 3 students who've left on school choice, 103 in the middle grades, 4 through 7, 154 at the high school level. And again, obviously, Nauset is only a middle and a high school region, so that's why they don't have any elementary students, but you can see the others are fairly equally spaced. So again, it's affecting us at all levels, K through 12. The other side of school choice is that students can opt to who live in other districts can choose to attend DY. So as of December, we have 77 students who have opted in on school choice. Again, the majority are from Barnstable. Again, the trend seems to go from west to east, so the Barnstable students are coming to DY. Again, we do have some from Monomoy and Nauset coming in, and they've got a few others around. And again, those tend to be more at the lower level and the upper level, not quite as many in the middle school range. So that's the enrollment numbers. Now we want to get to how much this costs us. So we budgeted a little over $2 million for school choice expense, and we budgeted $669,000 in revenue for a net cost of $1,352,000. What the actual costs are based on the December are an increase in the expense because there are more students attending than were projected, and a decrease in the revenue because less students are coming in than were projected. So it's a net variance in the red of $279,000. And just to play this out, how we budgeted, and again, the budget was created almost a year ago, and before the state numbers even came out. So we were making estimates based on prior history. When the state budget was finally passed and the state puts out the cherry sheet, the revenue was pretty much the same, but they had a higher tuition number. They expected even more students to depart by choice. In September, when the enrollment actually came in and we encumbered money in the budget, we essentially adopted the cherry sheet numbers. And as we've talked about in the past, when we talked about the current year's budget, that created a budget gap for us. And when we bring in the actual number, that's where we see we have a spread of $279,000 based on the plus and the minus of the expense and the revenue. If we look at the DY school choice trends over the years, you can see on the receiving side, we have 77 here. The last 2 years, we've had 96 and 99. However, at the Q2 portion of these 2 years, the numbers were right around this number. So I would anticipate that this 77 would go up into the 90s as it has in the last 2 years, in which case the revenue number would go back up to where we had expected it to be. The sending number, it's an increase of 10. The tuition cost is that even though it's more kids, it's less tuition. And the reason why for that is something called the special education increment. So the way school choice works is it's a baseline of, for every student that either comes or goes, it's a baseline of $5,000 per year that exchanges between the two districts. However, if the student has any special education needs, whether it's transportation or additional services, those costs are also passed on as well. What we can see here over the last year was we had $575,000 worth of special ed increments last year. This year, only $470,000. So the sped part has gone down $100,000. So even though we've lost 10 more students, the average tuition has gone back down to where it had been prior years. So the total has actually gone down even though we've lost a few more kids. So the bad news is we've lost 10 more kids. The good news is we're spending less in tuition, so I'm not sure which of those perhaps outweighs the other. When we look at how our neighbors are doing, we all know that Cape Cod is a very, very competitive environment for school choice. As you can see here, we look at the sending numbers for each district and the receiving numbers for each district. The reason they don't match is because you've got some kids that are closer to the bridge that are actually going off Cape. So they're not included in this count, but you've got almost 1,000 kids in these districts that are going back and forth. Millions of dollars are changing hands between Cape districts just because kids are going to the school district in the next town over or a couple of towns over. One way that we look at it is we net it out. So, okay, take how many you're sending out versus how many you're bringing back, and are you ahead or below? You can see here, for example, Nauset is sending out only 57.5, but they're bringing in 316, so they have a net of 258, so they're doing pretty well in that. Obviously, DY has struggled with this for a number of years. We're sending out a lot more kids than we're bringing in, and that's where it ends up being a net cost. Again, if we look at the trend over time, so if we look back at the last 7-8 years, again, DY in the green, this is receiving. So we're receiving a few more kids than we had back in 2007. It's an increase of only 8.8%. Cape-wide, though, has gone up 94%. So we're behind the curve, obviously, on the receiving. A lot of these other districts have doubled and tripled in their receiving enrollment. Obviously, it's a boon to them. On the sending side, however, even though we have the most on the Cape, our rate of increase over the last 7-8 years has been, so even though the raw numbers are higher, the percentage increase is less than towns like Bourne. Bourne has gone from 5 to 75. That's a 15-fold increase. Falmouth has quadrupled, Mashpee has quadrupled, Sandwich has, gone up from 13 to 60, so huge percentage increases. So I guess from that perspective, even though we are losing a high number of kids in a raw number, the rate of them has slowed down compared to our neighbors in other towns. So before I go on to the charter school, I don't know if anybody has any questions on school choice, or if we want to just keep going. Yes. Good? Oh,
Mr. Hanbury, question?
Yeah, in the slide labeled Cape Cod School Choice FY14, it says some of the schools are sending out like a number and then 0.5. How does that work?
The way it worked is 10 months in the school year, and it takes fractions of, so if it's a 0.5, it means that the student had attended for half of the time. So if they've gone 5 months out of the school year, then it counts as a 0.5. So it's when you see some of these other numbers that are 0.9, 0.3, it means when you average it out, or when you add them up all the fractions, that's why there are some decimals in there.
Thank you.
One of the things that happens, Patrick, is that kids, of course, come and go all throughout the year, and there might be kids that have been going to DY, for example, all along, and they want to stay at DY and they want to finish their year, but their family has moved to Barnstable or Harwich or wherever, and so they put in a school choice form at that point because they want to continue to come. So it could be any time throughout the year that kids can come and go.
Right, good point. Yep.
Mr. Carey?
Larry, how are we doing at the 8th grade? This is, I know it's not broken down, and it's probably an unfair question to ask you because it's not in front of us.
I think we're going to get to some of that if you let them
Okay.
get through the
Yep.
the charter, because we're going to look at the whole, the
And that's-
thing as an overall.
Great, and
if
even
your
if it's
questions,
another night.
yeah.
Great, sorry, thank you.
I was just scrambling to see if I had that number. I'll look when we finish up here. So on to charter school. Charter obviously is a one-way street for the most part in terms of enrollment. Kids leave to go to other charter schools. We don't have our own charters, so it's just how many kids are sending. So there are two charter schools that serve students on the Cape. There's Lighthouse Charter for grades 6, 7, and 8. There's Sturgis and Hyannis for grades 9 through 12. You can see that there are 169 kids from the DY district going to charter schools, and that's about a 25 to 75% ratio. So, or in the school choice, it was closer to 50-50, with where Dennis was overrepresented, I guess, based on the full enrollment. In the charter school, Yarmouth has the larger share of it. Again, probably more geography because of the high school kids that are going to Sturgis, which is obviously closer to Yarmouth. And again, another important point to note for both choice and charter is that unless the child is attending a charter or choice, not really, but a charter school within the town, there's no obligation to provide transportation. So all of the DY students who are attending either a charter school in another district or attending, obviously, a public school district outside are all on their own for transportation. So unlike where we provide transportation to the St. Pius students, because that's in Yarmouth, there's no transportation cost there. The only exception to that would be for special ed students who, if it's in their IEP to transportation, that's part of that sped increment we talked about. Could be transportation if there's an agreement that has to be some transportation provided.
Larry, could I also
Yeah.
add that when you're looking at this chart, one of the things that, a little assumption that you can make, this goes back to Mr. Carey's question. You see Sturgis in the 9th grade with 19, and you see Cape Cod Lighthouse Charter with 16 in grade 6. It's highly likely that those are the kids that left this year. And if you compare it to grade 10 and grade 7, you see a significant decrease.
Right. Exactly right. The 7th graders and the 10th graders left last year, and fewer of them appear to have left this year, so that's obviously good news, and we'll have a follow-up on that in a sec. So again, on the charter costs, again, the budget was created almost a year ago. before the state came out with its budget. So we budgeted $1.8 million in tuition expense. And for reimbursement, it's a complicated formula for charter schools. It's based on how much of an increase you have from year to year in the enrollment. So in some ways, the more kids who leave in a particular year to go to a charter school, you get more back in reimbursement. So just because you have a higher charter reimbursement doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. So we've budgeted that the net expense for charter schools would be just under $1.35 million. When the state budget came out, however, they had a huge increase in tuition expense for charter schools. They were predicting a lot more kids going to charter schools than we had thought. But somewhat contradictorily, I don't know if that's even a word, somewhat to the contrary, they had the reimbursement going down. So I'm not sure how they figured that out, but that's the numbers that the state adopted. So that right there put us $662,000 to the negative. Again, when we encumbered, we took the state's tuition number because we wanted to be conservative and not have to play catch up later on in the year. But we did think that the reimbursement number that the state adopted was a little bit low, so we kept our number. So that shrunk the number a little bit. What finally ended up happening in Q2 is somewhere in the middle. The tuition expense is less than the state thought it would be. It's about $140,000 less, but the reimbursement number is even less than the state had predicted on the cherry sheet. And the reason why is this. This number in green, there's 169 kids at charter schools this year. That's a decrease of 5.8 from last year. For the first time in a long time, charter school loss has gone down from DY. That's very, very positive news. As I said, as Brian mentioned and Carol alluded to on that prior slide, looking at the 6 and 9 versus 7 and 10, that's telling us less kids went, and this bears it out. So the less kids went, the expense is up slightly from last year because essentially the way the formula works on the tuition, it's based on the foundation budget, which has a natural inflationary factor to it. But the reimbursement is down a lot because the reimbursement is based on the year-over-year change, and because the year-over-year change is negative, you're not getting anything for the current year but you're getting from prior years. If you recall, it's a multi-year formula based on differing percentages. So unfortunately, the net cost is still a big increase, even though less kids have gone, but the reimbursement's down. So that's kind of the good news. Bad news part of it is that fewer kids have gone, but because fewer kids have gone, there's less reimbursement available, so therefore it ends up still costing you in the end. The other part of the tuition reimbursement is that's subject to state funding, whereas school choice is its own thing. If someone goes from DY to Nauset or from Barnstable to DY, those funds just change hands between the local districts. The charter reimbursement comes from the state, so it's dependent on the state budget. So what happened last year was that the initial reimbursement we got was actually less than this $489. But at the very end of the year, the governor and the legislature passed a supplementary budget that boosted that number up to a higher number. It's supposed to be at 100%. I think it ended up at about 95%. So that's a number that, even though there's a formula and it was passed in the law and is in the regs, if it's not funded at the State House, you don't get as much money. Similar to circuit breaker, similar to transportation. It's one of those things that it comes from the state. It's not like, because it's not like school choice where you get it from the other town. It is a little bit more fluid. So again, if we look at the trends, again, I think this is another positive note for DY. If we go back from '07 to the current year, again, DY has gone up 57%, but with the exception of Nauset, which has actually gone down in charter enrollment, it has the slowest growth of every Cape district around us. Bourne, if you've heard on, actually I think I just heard on the radio today in the news snippets, discussions in the town of Bourne about hundreds of thousands of dollars of outflow in choice and charter enrollment that obviously you can see. They've gone up 600, almost 600% in the last 7 years. That's a huge increase. Mashpee, again, has more than doubled. Sandwich, again, is another town that's gone up almost 3 times as much. So again, even though the numbers are higher than they've been in the past, the rate of outflow has slowed in comparison to most of the other districts on the Cape. So I think that's a positive sign to take away from this. And again, as you see, that we're having the raw number actually go down year over year, I think is a very positive output. So any questions on charter before we just wrap up with a couple of summary pieces of
St. Germain.
information?
Thank you, Larry. Could we go back to slide 23? I think it's,
I think I have different numbers than you do.
no, well, that's
Sorry.
20. So 23 is just a little,
This
there
one?
it is.
All right.
In that 169 in green,
Yep.
am I to understand this, and this is what I thought you said, because there are fewer students going to the charter school, the increases per student fee or price or the amount of money that would have to be going for each student? Is that what you said? So if you had 174.8, I'm just trying to try to figure out exactly why it's higher when it's 169 as opposed to 174.
The charter tuition that districts are assessed for students that go out to charter is based on each district's foundation formula, which among the components of the foundation formula include how many or the percentage of low-income students you have, ELL students you have, and special education students you have. And because DY has either the highest or close to the highest numbers of those demographic groups on the Cape, our assessed tuition for charter schools is higher than other towns that have lower numbers of that. So because the point behind that is that the experience that the child receives at the charter school should be, I don't want to say equal or maybe more parallel. Essentially, the spending that the home district spends on that child should carry over to that, so the child isn't essentially penalized for going to the charter school and not having this equivalent resources. So I guess the theory behind that is, okay, based on the components of the enrollment demographics in the DY district, that DY would spend X amount of money because we have more low-income kids and more ELL kids and so on and so forth. The part that critics will cite is that, well, if you go to Sturgis, there's no ELL kids at Sturgis. You have 50% low-income kids at DY, the 6% at Sturgis. So our tuition is assessed at what the DY demographics are and gets transferred over to the charter school, but they don't have the same demographics that we do. Now, how they choose to spend it is their thing, but that's where I think some of the critics of the funding formula get into and say, well, we're given, it's roughly an average $12,000, $13,000 when you weigh in those demographic factors, but it's not apples to apples over there. So that's where districts that have more high needs students like DY does, and even Barnstable to an extent too, pay a higher tuition rate. So of all the districts that feed into Sturgis and Lighthouse, all those towns, all those districts pay different rates based on what their home rates are. And yeah.
It's very difficult to draw a straight line from that to what we're spending, and you can see that the number went down by, as Larry said, about 5 students. And in reality, the budget part of it, the expense part of it is not even quite $10,000, about $9,500 increase. but we're not getting as much reimbursement because it depends on where the students are. Remember, that's that 6-year funding formula, where in the first year that they go, it's 100%, then for the next 5 years, it's 25%, but nobody can really tell us because we've asked questions about, like, that Sturgis is only a 4-year school. So what happens, like, are we still getting money when they're gone, or, we can't get answers to those kinds of questions. And the reality is that that what Larry's talking about is the foundation budget. And the state has a formula for the foundation budget to tell districts about how much it should cost to educate the students in their town. What he was talking about with the high needs or the subgroup populations, or however you want to categorize it, is the state recognizes that if you have ELL students in your district, it's going to cost a little bit more because you're going to have some ELL teachers. If you don't have any ELL students, you don't need any ELL teachers. So therefore, within that formula, you get an increment, shall we say, of more money because they know that it's going to cost X amount of dollars. So it's very difficult, and I can understand why it's confusing to you. It's confusing to us, but the bottom line is that whatever the state has determined is our foundation budget per student, is the amount that goes with every student that goes.
And it's different for each district.
That's correct.
So if you're from Barnstable or Yarmouth or Sandwich, that's going to be a different for each district.
One of the things that's been said, we all know that Provincetown for a long time, they've been really, really declining in their enrollment, and it's costs a lot per pupil in the $25,000 a student. And so districts like that have been saying things like, well, of course the charter schools like to take our students because look at what they're getting on a per student basis. So, yeah. I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I guess my question is, if you were, take Nauset, for instance, they would probably pay less to Sturgis than DY because of their population mix. But on the same respect, the foundation budget for this district would be higher than theirs.
That's
On a per
possible.
student basis.
Yes,
Is that
that's
correct?
possible. That is possible.
Thank you.
I want to see if I'm doing some math correct. When you were talking about school choice, one of the slides you showed, and you don't have to go back to it, had an average tuition per pupil of $6,300 or so. If I were to extrapolate using, if I were to use that same sort of thinking on slide 23 that we were just looking at that showed $1.9 million in net cost and 169 students, that would give us a per pupil expense of $11,600. Is that how I would do that?
Yeah, the charter tuition per pupil is more, because like I said, the charter tuition expense is based on that foundation formula, which for DY is in the 12,000 range. School choice, regardless of your demographics
Gotcha.
or anything, it's a base of 5,000. Now, there are some that it's actually less than that, but it's no more than 5. Most districts are 5,000. And then there's a special ed increment added onto that. You don't get the special ed increment on the charter tuition because that's baked into the foundation formula. So they're a little bit different in that
So
regard.
these charter school students hurt a lot more than a choice student as far as financials.
Yeah, it's about twice as
Yikes.
much.
And to Ms. St. Germain's point about kind of disparities with charters and things, one of the sessions that I think several of us here attended at the MASC conference was about charter schools, and there was a fellow there from was it the commission, the Department of Ed, and his seat was really smoking. He was in the hot seat quite a bit. There was a lot of, not to throw stones, but it almost sounded like they really didn't have any idea off Cape of really what the Cape was dealing with. So I think that if he brought back the message to his folks, that hopefully something will get looked at a little bit closer, but.
Well, there are new regulations that are out for charter schools that are out for public comment now, I think. I just had a conference call on Friday with some people from MASC. I've been on that charter school task force, and just talking about what our particular talking points would be or whatever. So there are people taking a look at that because there's a lot of feeling about equity issues.
May I just say one thing about that? I know the commissioner doesn't hear my voice, but I think that it's time that he stepped in to help us, because there's a lot of fighting on the Cape for students, because that point blank, that's what it is. We have a lot of great schools, DY included, and what do? You have a small number of students, declining enrollment Cape-wide. And I think the commissioner has to step in and do something about it, because it's not going to get any better. And we don't want to fight amongst ourselves. That's not what we are as Cape Codders.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's really just the commissioner. I mean, these things come from the legislature. And, you know, we're kind of up against situations like in big cities and stuff where perhaps some schools are not doing as well as some of our schools here on the Cape. And so, you know, parents want more choice and those kinds of things because they feel that, you know, whatever. And so what I've heard quite often is that it's really about the fact that our legislators are really in a different kind of situation with the other legislators across the state. And so, you know, it's the legislative body that approves these sorts of things. And I mean, it seems funny to me. I mean, as Larry showed it earlier, 1,000 students that live on Cape Cod are like going in all different places. That's a lot.
I didn't mean to get this off topic. Do you have a, sorry, thank you.
Yep. Just to wrap up with a couple of slides combining the choice and the charter. So again, we budgeted a net expense of $2.7 million. The state came out with a budget that was almost $3.6 million. We encumbered a net expense of just less than $3.5 million, so that created a gap of almost $750,000 for us, which again we shared previously with the committee. Based on these numbers coming in, again, the expense is actually down almost $200,000. It's great news, but the reimbursements for choice and charter are down. Again, the choice reimbursements I would expect to go up as they've done the last couple of years as we get towards the end of the year. The charter numbers, I wouldn't hold my breath too much on, because those are basically set once a year. So we're looking at a budget gap just on out-of-district tuition of almost $900,000. Again, if the choice numbers go up again like they've done in the past, that could be another potentially up to $100,000. And we'll obviously keep an eye on that as that progresses. Just a couple of summary charts here to bring things home. If we look at the overall enrollment trends on students who are leaving the district by either choice or charter, you can see here from 13 to 14, it's pretty much flattened out. The growth is starting to plateau out. If we look at the same data in a slightly different way, if we look at year-over-year increase, so what these numbers represent is how many additional students or how many net additional students are leaving the district every year. So in FY08, the increase in students that left by choice or charter grew by 57 from the prior year. Then there were 46, 43, 49, 33, 31. This year, as I said, 4.2 more than last year. That is a huge decrease. So that has not only financial implications. Again, you saw the tuition expense almost $200,000 down. But it maintains continuity, you don't have all these kids coming in and out. So that is a big, big plus that I think we should look at. Again, on the net tuition trends, it's the net tuition's going up, but that's largely because the reimbursements are coming down. And again, the charter reimbursements, because they're not a direct correlation and it's a multi-year formula, when your enrollment slows down on the charter, your reimbursements slow down because there's less kids leaving, there's less reimbursement. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that case. And again, lastly, just to put this all on one slide together, so we budgeted a net cost of $2.7 million. Right now, we're projecting almost $3.6 million. So even though with that good news, we're still behind the curve by a significant amount. And we are actively working to address that, and that's all I got.
Mr. Edwards, please.
For this coming budget cycle, what are we going to be using for our numbers?
For FY15, I would say we'll probably err more towards the side of the 14 numbers than what we've done in the past is somewhat of a blend of historical plus, because again, we budget before the state number comes out. And now we have a multi-year pattern of looking at what we budgeted versus what the state came out. That's why I showed those charts sort of progressing versus our budget versus the cherry sheet versus what actually came in, so we can see that progression and assess, did we do a good job with the budget or not. So you can see we underestimated on the budget, we for the expense, we underestimated on the reimbursement, but that is a little harder to predict. So I think as we move forward, we'll end up closer to what's actually happening.
And one last thing, if we're doing it on a sliding scale where we get most of our reimbursements when they first start, and less the reimbursements as they continue on in the charter schools, and if our charter school sending is starting to go down, then that should be a net, we're figuring that in too, is that correct? On how much are your reimbursements? In other words, the first year a child goes to the charter, you get almost 100% reimbursement, and then as that child goes to the next year, you get a portion less, a portion less, a portion less. And as those people drop off, if they're not being replenished on the other side, yes, our reimbursement's gonna go down, but also the money that we're spending to go out should go down too.
Yes, that is correct. The tricky part on the charter reimbursement is that it's a lot harder to predict than the school choice revenue, because the school choice revenue is however many kids opt to attend DY during that year, we get $5,000 plus any sped increments. For the charter, because it's a multi-year formula that's based on growth, it's a lot harder to predict. And as Carol said, we've asked the state, can you help us predict it? Give us the spreadsheet so we can model it, and they don't have anything to share with us. So we try to go on historical trends of the enrollment and the reimbursements. And again, the tricky part with that is that, as I said, the charter reimbursements are appropriated by the legislature. So if the legislature has a down year, they might cut that line item, in which case you're going to get less.
Why is it that they will not? But then but the point.
Somebody somewhere has a spreadsheet that
Somebody
tracks this
has something
because
that
they
has
put
it.
the numbers out to tell you how much they're
And so the
taking.
question is do we have to, if they're unwilling to give us this information, okay, which is quite apparently what we're up against, is that not correct?
Yeah. For a
Okay,
large part.
then can we not file for what's that, freedom of information to get that, in order to force them to give that? Because if if we can't, there should be no reason why we can't get that. None whatsoever. And you're telling me that someone at the State Department of Education refuses to give us the information so that we can help better predict our budget. They refuse to do it.
can ask
Yeah,
again.
we've
I'm
asked
not sure we
several
want to
times, yeah.
spend any money on attorney fees to try to fight to get that.
Well, it's not that, it's just a question of filling out a form, isn't it?
Yeah, but once they don't give it to you, even though you've asked, then what?
This is
Right,
Massachusetts.
and
I mean,
Then you talk to we talk to our representatives and say, hey, look, we've asked for this information. It's not that we want to,
I think we should do that first and fight.
well, maybe we'll do it before Cleon leaves.
Mr. Dykeman?
Larry, we've got $891,000 negative that we hadn't budgeted for. Are we taking provisions for that?
yes, we spent most,
Larry and I won't be at the next meetings until next September.
We're going to cut your salary.
yeah, we're docking all your pay. Yeah, we've been working on this for a while. We had the whole team spend most of today. We're spending the next several weeks until we get this done. And we will share our findings with you on how we close it. But yeah, we're definitely working on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Carey, please?
Larry, can you hear me? Will you be, I think Jack fixed it, but, Larry, will you be giving us overall enrollment numbers in future meetings?
We gave overall
Did I
enrollment
miss it?
numbers back in October. You mean, we have 3,100 students in October 1st, and we have 3,102 as of December 1st. How about that?
That's what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
And last year on October 1st, we had 3,140-ish. We think it was about 3,138. But remember how many kids went to, I think it was 63 that went to tech.
Correct.
And obviously some kids here, so then we brought some more in, but
You may not have this information, the December 13th reimbursement number there, the actual for Q2, 798,000. Do you know how that compares to the same number for December 2012? Like, does that look like it's lower than, is it on there?
It's easier for me to look it up than flip through.
I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't have it there.
Where is it? Yeah, on the school choice,
Oh, there it is.
yeah, if you look on your slides on the trends, the school choice revenue is down about $100,000. But that's because the number of kids is down. But as I said, if the last couple of years are any indication, I would expect that to go back up and match. And on the charter, it's down almost in half from what we had last year. We did budget this year to be slightly less than last year, knowing we would have some slow. But obviously we didn't expect it to drop off that
Right.
dramatically.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yep.
Could you go to slide 31? I think it should be the one with the blue line. Can you make a chart like that for expenses?
I can make one.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
I can make any kind of chart you want. Different colors too.
Mr. Morris, please.
It's awfully hard not to rail against these, the implications of these figures when actually we just have to make plans for the budget and the programs. It's interesting, I'll rail here for a vent for just a minute here. When the whole concept of ed reform came in, they were to address the urban problems of schools not meeting the needs of kids in who were being underserved in the urban areas in particular, and choice and charter was a way to see if people could come up with innovative ways, and a lot of the charter schools were geared for kids from less successful backgrounds. But it was interesting that as we now know, statewide it's about 2%, a little bit more, of kids in charter schools, and on the Cape it's 7%, where we have poverty levels that are high, particularly DY, but not just DY. But at the same time, the creation of the charter school environment on the Cape is addressing a problem that does not exist when compared to the original concept of why they put this in. So we're paying the price as a community to help help substantiate a charter school that is not serving the same community levels of challenged kids and challenged families that the traditional public schools do. Which leads me to the question, do we have readily available, or can we secure figures for the special needs kids that are in our communities, as well as how many are going to choice and charter? Is that broken out? Because that would also lend a credible platform to some of the things we're talking about.
So are you asking of the students who go to charter schools from DY, how many of those 169 kids are special ed or low income or ELL? Is that what you're at?
In essence, yes. We know what the levels are at the charter schools based on the DESE figures, but they don't do a marketing program to reach out toward the kids, to the families that have those needs. So if they have a certain level that's considerably below that of, let's say, Sturgis, which draws upon the surrounding communities, how many of those kids in those schools are themselves bringing those SPED needs to that school?
I think if you wanted to see of the DY kids going to the charter schools, I mean, we'd probably have to just look up each kid individually. I don't know that there's
If
aggregate
we
data,
actually
but
have any information on each
yeah,
kid.
if the student never attended DY or if they attended years ago, it could be outdated data. I don't know that you get that
especially
level,
income
but-
levels, people, we've had some difficult times, and some people have lost their jobs and things, and before they weren't in a situation where they would be considered in a low-income situation, but some things have happened for them, and they are now. So I don't know that we could do that with any accuracy. I'd be worried about that. But we don't really need to. We already know as an overall picture. It's just like we have the statistics for our district. We have on the DESE website, there's statistics, similar statistics for the charter schools as well. We know there are no ELL students attending. We know that, what did you say, 6.6% or something
Yes,
like that?
I think
of
the low income is 6.5, and DY is in the 40s,
Yeah.
high 40s.
And I think what I saw was special education was around 12%, and most of the typical districts are between 15 and 17. But again, when you just make that category, and we've had these conversations many, many times, it doesn't always indicate the level of need. So it's much different if you have a child who requires a lot of services, PT, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, special education teacher, whatever. And again, this is one of the things that I love about DY. Every child belongs here, and we do the very best we can for each and every child. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. And I think that this is stellar performance. And this is thanks to our teachers, our assistants, our maintenance crew, our principals, everybody. You remember last year when we were trying to convince people that it was a good idea to do some further consolidation in our district. We had 25 public meetings. We have teachers and other staff that go on TV shows to tell people about some of the great things that are happening at DY. And I think this is evidence that it's starting to pay off. Lots of things are leveling out. So we have about 40 fewer students, 38 or 36 fewer students than we had last year. That's remarkable when you compare it to some of the things. And we know how many kids went to tech, and for those kids that was the right thing for them. I'm everybody has those choices. But I think we've done a remarkable job, and we owe a lot of gratitude to our staff for always trying to promote the district in a way that was never done before. My biggest concern right now is that I don't want the number, meaning the number that we have as a deficit, to send people fleeing to someplace else because we have to cut our programs or something. That's why we're looking at this very carefully to try to figure out what can we do, where can we hold on to some money so that we can, if that becomes the reality by the end of the year, that we're able to take care of business. Because we're also in a situation right now with the E&D. So we're not in a really good position. But to begin to dismantle the things that we have worked so hard, So I hope you'll indulge us with the time that we're trying to take to make these careful decisions about what we need to do going forward. So we don't have answers for you tonight, but we have had many conversations, and we will have to have some about next year as well.
Thanks.
I did
Larry,
find
Lamar.
the question that Brian had asked earlier about the 8th graders who've left on choice. So currently, there are 39 ninth graders who are attending another district on school choice. There are only 24 8th graders that are attending on school choice. So similar to the trend you saw in the charter enrollment with grade 6 and 9, it appears that the 8th graders this year's 8th graders have, by more than 50% reduction, less than last year's 8th graders. So, again, another positive trend.
Of course, part of the problem with that is we don't know when they left.
True.
They just leave this year, or did they leave 5 years ago? We know, and we continue to monitor how many people go in kindergarten. We know that we had a particularly bad year one year when we weren't sure if we were going to have full-day kindergarten. We are trying to look at it from every angle, and the K-3 principals will be taking their show on the road to the preschools. And we have some nights coming up next week, actually. We have some nights for our families to come in and visit. One of the things that we promised the community last year was that we would pay close attention to the transitions. So when 7th graders are going up to 8th grade, when 5th grade is going to 6th grade, and when our 3rd graders are going to 4th grade, that we would have. And so we're beginning that process now. And so we'll have some open house nights for our parents with some presentations about what the next school has to offer so that kids can start to get excited about that. We'll be having our DY Advantage Week the week before the February vacation. And that's a time when people can come in during the day, and we invite them to do that because we think there's nothing better than seeing school when school is in session. It's really hard in the evening. It's dark this time of year, and it doesn't feel as stimulating, although I'm sure the principals and students will put on a stimulating presentation. And then we will follow up with taking kids on visits during the day, as we did in the past years. So we have those things coming up right around the corner.
May I add one add-on to that from my other statement? Sometimes the research to find answers to obtuse questions that I might ask is not worth it's not as useful to use that so much as the engagement of the community that you're outlining is far more valuable. So if some of the questions don't have easy answers, what we do have is positive responses to what's going on in the schools, and that's the best selling point of all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next on our agenda is the superintendent's report. Mrs. Woodbury,
I
please.
had kind of already started my report with that, but I'll give a couple of other tidbits that have been taking place. As you know, before the holidays, we had the Station Avenue School during the lunch breaks. Mr. Kroll and Mr. Riley, Mr. Kroll on the clarinet, Mr. Riley on the saxophone, entertained their students during lunch. And they also made a surprise visit to the central office, which was kind of fun. At the all-school meeting at Station Ave for next week, our students are focusing on responsibility. Happens at 2:30 in the gym on Monday, January 13th. At Baker, I want to say that we wish Karen Boscheman well. She just retired, and she's put in a lot of years of service to the district, and she will be missed. She's happily gone off on her retirement. Over at Emmy Small, we had our holiday concerts right before vacation, and those were really, really well received. And even though they were broken down into 2 grades, and we have a bigger gym over there and everything now, we still couldn't get all the people in. It felt very tight. The students over at Emmy Small ended their 2013 year with the passing of a kindness ball. Now, you know that the Emmy Small School is kind of shaped like a baseball diamond. So all of the students got out in the hallway and made the ring around. So they were all standing in like a big baseball diamond. And they passed the kindness ball around. It was a white feathered ball as a symbol of kindness and love. It took almost 15 minutes to get the ball from beginning to end, but it was a great way for them to share and be together on the last day of school. At Mattakees, we'd like to congratulate Donna McCush. I don't know if you all saw this, but there was a little article in the Cape Cod Times about what she was doing with her students for the Cape Cod Needy Fund. And she was also recognized as a Teacher of the Month last month. And one of the things that happens at Mattakees is they have a Teacher of the Month that's nominated by the students, and it's for something that the students see that the teachers do, which is really terrific. This month's person is Wendy Walker. She's a 6th grade math and social studies teacher, and she was nominated by a student who wrote about how Mrs. Walker helped her to improve by continuing to help her until she understood. And so those are the kinds of really great things that we hear from our students about our teachers. If you haven't seen it yet, you really need to go on the web and try to find the Mattakees Channel 5 Eye Opener Wake Up Call. It was shown for a second time this morning, and it was shown also in December, and the video has had over 5,100 views. So that's kind of cool. Speaking of programming and all the great things that we feel like we're doing, our band director, Scott Graff, over at Mattakees, was also featured in an article on January 2nd of the Register. Mattakees Goes Caribbean, and it was about the steel drum program. There's a gentleman in town named Michael Gabriel, and he came in and gave a concert and also worked with the Mattakees Steel Drummers. He participates in a Trinidadian panorama competition, and it's the preeminent steel band competition in the world. Last year, the band he plays with placed first. He'll be returning to Trinidad in February to participate in this year's competition, and Mattakees was happy to announce that he has agreed to partner with their school and to work with their steel drummers throughout the year, so that's very cool. The last thing about Mattakees is that they're hosting a workshop for middle school girls through the MIAA. And the workshop will feature Deb Holt, a presenter for core trainings on learning to lead, leadership for middle school girls, which I think is very exciting. It was held in Franklin last year, and it received rave reviews from 20 Mattakees girls who participated. So Mattakees is proud to have been chosen as the site for this year's workshop. Also, you mentioned the gingerbread contest. I understand that they raised $700. Do you know where the donation, who they donated it to? I don't know.
Goes to the Interact Club.
Okay. And the Interact Club is a branch of Rotary. And do you know where the donation was going? Habitat for Humanity. So a lot of good things happening, good programs, and Happy New Year.
Any questions for Ms. Woodbury? Seeing none, we will move on to our consent agenda, which includes donation items following. Children's literature books were donated to the Margaret E. Small Elementary School by Mr. and Mrs. Brian Carey of Dennis. And the Town of Dennis Senior Management Team donated $235 in food gift cards to Miss Tanya Rosa, the social worker at the Ezra H. Baker Innovation School, and we thank all of them very much for their donations.
Move the consent agenda. It's printed.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. We also have some articles and information items. If I could just read a couple of them quickly. There's some Boston Globe, Boston.com polls. There's a field hockey poll rating teams, field hockey teams of the 20 that are listed for field hockey. They have Dennis-Yarmouth as number 10 with a record of 17-1-2, which is fantastic. And there's also a top 20, although there's 100 teams listed here. It's listed as a top 20 for football, high school football. And as I mentioned, there's 100 teams listed, and it has Dennis-Yarmouth as number 11 with a record of 10-3.
And they went up with a loss.
So we also have bills, requisitions, and payroll on the table. If I could just hit the calendar quick. Wednesday, January 8th, 7 p.m. is the special ed PAC meeting at the DY Administration Office. The meeting on January 9th of the steering committee meeting for the district strategic planning has been postponed. As Mrs. Woodbury touched on, January 13th from 6:30 to 8 at the high school will be their showcase. January 14th, Tuesday, same time, 6:30 to 8 at the Nathaniel H. Wixon School. And January 15th, Wednesday, 6:30 to 8 at the Mattakese Middle School. January 16th, as Mr. Hanbury touched on, 7 p.m. Don't miss the high school band. I know that their jazz band is phenomenal, and their little stands that they got, was it last year, I believe, those are really cool. January 17th, Friday, is the All Cape Professional Day. There will be no school, but there is a bowling fundraiser for the Education Foundation. And the following Monday, January 20th, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. There will be no school then either. Our next meeting of this body will be Thursday. Everybody note so you don't miss it. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. here. And that's what we have going on between now and then.
Motion adjourned.
But before you adjourn, that's,
You said Thursday, but you didn't say the date.
Oh, sorry, Thursday, January 23rd. Thank you. Next school committee meeting. We have a motion and a second. Oh, some information on the Educational Foundation bowling fundraiser. As I mentioned, it's on Friday, January 17th. The time is 5 to 7 p.m., and the location is the Ryan Family Amusement on Route 28 in South Yarmouth, kind of next to the post office. $50 per hour per lane, shoe rental included, children welcome, 6 bowlers per lane. Get your group ready. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Go on.
Thank you for coming.